Welcome into the Warchant.com report. Always a pleasure to be with you. You can see here I'm joined by, of course, Gene Williams, founder and administrator of Warchant.com. Ira Schoffel, he does everything else that Gene doesn't do. And then there's this guy, Corey, that does some stuff here and there. I'm Jeff from ESPN Radio, and we're going to talk about Florida State football. Oh, joy, 7:30 p.m. They're kicking it off against North Carolina State on the ACC network. If you don't have the ACC network, you're in luck. But in all seriousness, that is the game time. That's when we kick off. Mike Norvell announcing that several key players are out, of course. This announcement coming yesterday. I know you guys did a video about it already on warchant.com. I would encourage all of you to go and watch that as you guys discussed what happened. We'll do that again. Marvin Wilson's gone for the rest of the year with an injury. He does remain with the team, obviously. We'll be there to encourage his lads and hopefully get them to play better, glean some insight. Devastating loss of Devonta Love-Taylor. I hated for that young man. He was playing so well, really the anchor of the offensive line this year. He's out with an injury. They'll see if they can convince him to come back into next season. That would be great. Tamorrion Terry, no love lost there. He talked about Tamorrion Terry for about 5 seconds, noting that he's no longer with the program. He's gone. And, of course, James Blackman, this was one of those things we all knew eventually would come to pass. Unfortunate for James. 4 different offensive coordinators in his time here. It's been a tough go. He gets into this last game and immediately throws an interception. Highly predictable. It was kind of more on the coach than I think the player in that situation. That's just my opinion. But he and James have had an understanding and a good relationship, and James is going to take it on down the road now. So that's where we're at. All right, Gene, how big of an impact does this loss of the players that we just talked about, and really just the overriding sentiment, what's going on with this program right now? Wasn't a total cleaning house, as you guys talked about before, and a lot of fans thought was coming, but certainly it's not an indicator that things are all well in that locker room and things are going along swimmingly. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to have – I mean, effectively it's going to have no impact. You've lost, and you've lost badly to lower echelon teams, so what's the difference? I don't see much there. Really, honestly, the only legitimate loss that this impacts the team, in my opinion, is Love-Taylor, which you brought up. I mean, who's your best offensive lineman? Heck, he might be the second best player in the team next to Asante Samuel. I guess you can put if Jordan Travis is healthy, he's up there too. So that's a big blow, but as you alluded to, Jeff and Mike Norvell, it sounds like they're working towards getting him back next year. You put him in there with a whole offseason, with Alex Atkins, with all these young guys, the offensive line might actually be pretty good next year, so that's exciting. James Blackman was not going to play another snap at Florida State. That's, best of luck to him. Marvin Wilson has been a non-factor this year. 17 tackles, a couple tackles for loss. You can plug and play anybody else in there. They'll be just fine there. And then Terry, he played 1 or 2 games, maybe semi-healthy. He's obviously, we saw the blow up on the sideline with the coach. That was a bad look for him. I don't see, FSU's one big win. He was not on the field for that game. So really not a big deal at the end of the day for FSU. And, maybe it's, like you said, kind of cleaning house a little bit, just moving forward with these guys. So this happened a month ago. This would have been a huge story, but right now, really doesn't mean much for this program.
Ira, if you look at it from a glass half full perspective, I guess I would ask you, what positives are there, if any, that you take away from this week's developments? I think there are a lot of fans, for example, Ira, that feel like, okay, good. Let's continue to purge and continue to rid ourselves of guys who are not going to be part of the solution. Do you see any positives with this move?
Yeah, I definitely can see where you feel like it lends itself a little bit more to a fresh start. I mean, the reality is the last 3 or 4 seasons have been bad across the board for Florida State football. And that's not necessarily Marvin Wilson's fault or Tamorrion Terry's fault or James Blackman's fault. But the reality is this program's been going in the wrong direction. And you've seen this youth movement all season. Jordan Travis taking over a quarterback, Chuba Purdy now getting a lot of action. Those 2 guys are the future, along with probably Luke Altmaier, the incoming freshman at quarterback, are the future of that position. Having James Blackman around probably doesn't help matters. On the wide receiver, Tamorrion Terry and Marvin Wilson, again, are guys that have done a lot of good things in the past that hasn't happened this year, and they're leaving. Everybody knows they're leaving after the season. So having them around in terms of taking reps, being on the field in a limited capacity, playing through injuries, doesn't help a season that's already going to be a disappointing season. So getting more young players in the field, getting guys who are going to contribute next season, I think is all a positive. And to your point, I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a couple more guys leave before the season's over, and then maybe even more after the season. I don't think it's going to be a widespread purge, but I do think you're going to see more guys moving on as Florida State goes into a new direction.
The question now becomes what's left to play for. The Noles are 2-5. It's been a disaster of a season. They've just been blown out by two of the less stellar ACC squads. Now, I'll grant you, Pitt's up front on defense is as good as anybody in this conference, and it really came to pass in this football game. If we go back and we look at what happened in that game, Florida State gets off to a great start. They typically do. When on script, they look fantastic. But then you have the injury, and once Pitt figured out, we just got to heat up the pocket. We just got to put 6 or 7, and bring pressure every time, and they can't block us. This game was essentially over at that point. And then obviously the further it went on, you get Jordan Travis hurt in this game. There was no chance you were going to come back at that point. People can complain about the game plan. One thing I like, guys, is that, to me, Mike Norvell does always play to win. Now, that might get you blown out, but he is going to throw the football when he knows they're down by a big number because he's trying to win the game, if you will. I don't know that there was much he could have done because they could not block this Pitt front. Now, I'll ask you guys then, Ira, back-to-back blowout losses, as I just alluded to, what is left to play for this season?
Yeah, and just to follow up on what you were saying, they could, if the receivers can make any plays, and if then maybe you could get Pitt to back off, but they clearly weren't going to make any plays. Yeah, as far as what's to play for, the focus has to be on, if you can win games, great, but it's not likely going to happen. The focus really has to be on the play at hand, and that's something the coaches have been trying to preach to these players all year long. And there have been times where they bought into that. I think the Notre Dame game was a really good example where even though they were down big, they kept playing the second half. They played the plays that were there to be made. A week later, they go to Louisville, and after they beat North Carolina, they go to Louisville and just completely fall apart because they did the exact opposite. They got behind, started looking at the scoreboard, started panicking, and just completely fell apart. They have to get back to what they were doing in that Notre Dame game, where it's just about getting better for next season, executing each play as it goes, not worrying about the score. You're not going to turn this season around. It doesn't matter what happens in any of these last 4 games. You're not going to erase all the bad things that happen this season. Just focus on getting better every play because that's going to help them going into the next season.
Gene, what should Mike Norvell tell his players at this juncture to stay locked in and continue to compete?
I don't know, man. That's a tough sell. He better be a good salesman because at this point, man, how they've looked, losing these players to push forward. Here's what I think makes this really a challenge for him. A lot of times in these situations, you want to rely on your leaders, right? You go to the players, look, I need your help. Get these guys motivated. Well, think at the start of the season, who are your leaders? Well, on offense, you had James Blackman, right? You had Terry. They're gone. Defense, you've got Marvin Wilson, maybe Hamza in there as well. Hamza hasn't played a snap. Wilson's gone. So it's tough, man. But I will say the one thing, again, I spoke about the youth of this team. They mentioned it during the broadcast last week that Florida State had the second youngest team in the FBS. I think I haven't looked at the numbers specifically, but I think after the most recent attrition, they probably have the youngest team in the FBS right now. So you tell these young men, man, this is an opportunity. You're getting a lot of playing time in real competition that you normally wouldn't get, and we're going to build for the future. So, I mean, I that's about it. That's the only thing I can see right now that he might be able to sell to those young guys.
They are going to play a game on Saturday, unfortunately, against NC State, and it is at 7:30, a night game. They do get a reprieve from the Wiz Palace because there won't be that many fans there, so less urine bombs to experience in this particular matchup while being humiliated. That's a good thing. Should also note, if you want to listen to the pregame show on Warchant TV here on YouTube, you can. Myself and Tom Lang will join you bright and early, counter-programming to College Game Day, 10 a.m., Warchant TV, pregame show, Florida State, NC State, and then you stay on afterwards, talk about the big upset that Florida State springs, and you'll join, of course, Gene Williams and Tom Lang in the postgame on Warchant TV as well. Let's preview what NC State is very briefly when we come back on the Warchant.com report. Welcome back to the Warchant.com report. Florida State, North Carolina State, 7:30 ACC Network. As mentioned earlier, pregame show 10 a.m. Warchant TV. Myself, Tom Lang. Postgame afterwards on Warchant TV here on YouTube as well with Gene Williams and Tom Lang. Bailey Hockman, we remember the name, is the starting quarterback. He had come in, he had an injury at quarterback, broken leg. In fact, that's pretty brutal. You end up getting a start, and then he gets benched. And doesn't play real well in his opportunity, but then gets another opportunity and actually played pretty well against a Miami team there. They had a chance to win that game. They were leading late. They had a lot of things go well for them to be in that position, but he didn't play poorly, so great. Got a kid who's maybe a little bit confident now playing quarterback. I'll start with you, Gene. How big a problem is Bailey Hockman for Florida State's defense this weekend?
I can't believe you said that, man. The great Bailey Hockman. That we're cowering at that one. You know, I will say one thing. He's okay. I still think he's a very average quarterback. Florida State's played a gauntlet of really good quarterbacks lately. I don't think people realize that. Of course, Tim Pickett had a miraculous recovery last week, so Florida State always seems to be getting teams quarterbacks at their peak.
That was Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett. Sorry,
but I too love Tim Pickett, so that's all.
I wish Tim Pickett. He was pretty good too. He could still probably throw for 400 on Florida State. Either Pickett, but no, Hockman's very average. He's completing about 61% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. What makes him good, what makes him productive, he's got some really good players around him, a couple really good targets there. If I pronounce this correctly, Amike Amize, the 6'3", 220-pound wide receiver. This kid's going to play in the league. He's going to be a huge matchup problem for Florida State. I hope they get him and Asante matched up. That'll be fun to watch. And you know, Florida State going against a team, they've got to have a great tight end, right? Yes, NC State certainly does. Kerry Angeline. 6 touchdowns on the season for a tight end. That is second among all FBS tight ends right now. I don't know if there's a prop bet on this, Jeff, but I sure would. If there's a touchdown prop bet on him scoring a touchdown, man, I'm putting the house down on this. There's absolutely no doubt he's going to get at least 1 touchdown in this game.
Gene, in my experience, you can get a bet down on anything. You just got to know where to look, buddy.
Look for that one, Jeff. I'm telling you, he's going to score.
You got to know where to look. NC State ranks 90th in rushing offense. Pitt couldn't run the ball very well either, but I got a sense at some point in that game that if they had wanted to, they could have done anything they wanted. I guess I'll ask you, Ira, in this situation, they come in averaging 131 yards on the ground. Do they even bother to do that, or do they just throw the ball around? Your thoughts on Florida State's defense against Pitt's run game?
No, they've got good running backs. Yeah, I think they'll run the ball. I mean, the reality is Bailey Hockman, you mentioned before about his confidence. He's definitely a confident guy. He was confident when he was here. You guys remember when he came in, when he was a freshman, he was insisting he was going to beat out DeAndre Francois and everybody else. So he's a very confident player. The downside to that is you can make mistakes and you can try to do too much. And I wonder how the emotions will be in this game playing against a Florida State team that where he originally signed coming out of high school. Now he shouldn't have any ill feelings because he left Florida State. They didn't kick him out. But it's an opportunity for him to against a name opponent, have another nice game after we did against Miami. So really, to be honest with you, if you're a Florida State fan looking at ways that paths to victory, I think Bailey Hockman maybe trying to do too much might be one of the things that could go wrong for them. If I'm Dave Doran, I'm pounding the ball on the ground. I'm not going to let mistakes keep Florida State in the game, because one thing we've seen from Florida State is the game goes on, they start to wilt, especially if things aren't going well. You don't want to give them any added confidence.
It's hard when we do these previews for other teams right now. Florida State is just outmanned in so many areas that even when teams have other weaknesses, for example, we're about to talk about one. NC State's defense sucks. It's just not any good, period. 103rd in the nation, giving up 472 yards a game. That's worse than FSU, which is hard to believe. They've given up 40 points or more in 2 straight games, but that was against, obviously, North Carolina and Miami. I wonder when we look at this, let's start with how would you focus on getting a win or having success against this NC State defense?
The reason I thought, even after the Louisville loss, I thought there was a chance Florida State could win maybe 3 of these last remaining games was because they were going to face some bad defenses, particularly NC State. Duke's defense is also not very good, and I don't love Virginia's defense. So I thought that was why with Jordan Travis, Florida State would have some really good opportunities. The problem is we don't know if Jordan Travis is going to be available. My guess is he probably won't be. it didn't sound very promising when we talked to Mike Norvell on Wednesday. So now you're starting Chuba Purdy on the road with a limited receiving core, an offensive line that just lost its best offensive lineman, Devontae Love-Taylor. I don't see how Florida State's going to score a lot of points, even against a bad NC State defense. So that's going to be the problem. I think they'll score some because I do think NC State's defense will make some mistakes, and Florida State will get some opportunities. Perhaps LaDamian Webb or Ontario Wilson, somebody will make a couple of big plays. But if Jordan Travis doesn't play, I just don't see how Chuba Purdy is going to operate behind that offensive line and with these skill players and put up a lot of points against NC State.
Gene, it feels an awful lot like Chuba Purdy is going to start this game for Florida State. That's the sense you get as this week has gone on. Okay, let the Chuba Purdy era begin, perhaps. Your thoughts on how you would handle this young man's first start on the road, down your best offensive lineman, your most explosive weapon at wide receiver, even though he hasn't been good. He is a threat. He's now no longer on the team in Tamorrion Terry. Do we roll him out and give him a run-pass option? And if it's not there, go. What are you looking at doing this week?
What comes to mind is that famous Seinfeld episode where George Costanza does the opposite of what he's done in the past, and suddenly he gets a beautiful girlfriend and gets a high-paying job with the Yankees.
Yeah.
I'm saying the coaching staff, look at what you did with Chuba last Saturday and do exactly the opposite. Having him drop back in the pocket and sitting there and reading the field, a young guy who's still trying to process the speed of the game and make reads with a bad receiver core and a bad offensive line. Don't do that. Never. If he gets in those situations, you either go, hey, we do a draw, or we do one read, throw. If it's not there, you run. If that's not there, throw it away. That's it. You limit what he can do out there, and I would also get him on the run a lot. Him sitting in that pocket, no, roll him out, do some things with him like that. So the opposite. Now, you know what? I'm looking at this as a building opportunity. I know I pointed out earlier, and he's exactly right. Mike Norvell always plays to win, but at this point, I think it's more playing to give this young man some confidence, run some plays. Maybe you lose by 20 in this game, but man, give him something to build on here. Don't have him throwing. If you're down 20 in the fourth quarter, don't have him drop back in the pocket trying to throw bombs down the field. That is going to do nobody any good, and it's not going to win you the game.
It's an important point. Yeah, Mike has played and tried to send messages to his team all year long, calling timeouts late in games where they're losing, throwing the football when they're down the way you would if you had a team attempting to actually win the game and come back. He pretends as if the circumstances are different, and he's trying to instill a certain mentality. But you have to be careful in this situation. To your point, Gene, you're starting a kid who's not clearly had much time at all. I mean, he's 5 weeks behind. He didn't get a spring because he wasn't an early enrollee. Then when he got here, he got hurt. He missed a ton of practice time, so he couldn't even rep the offense. Now, if he does start here, this is a kid with very, very precious little experience. You could ruin him if you end up trying to roll him out there and throw the football 45 times in a game where they're just pinning their ears back and coming after him. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles the second half of this football game if Florida State is trailing like we suspect that they will be. What's left to play for in the 2020 season? What are our expectations? We'll talk about it next on the Warchant.com report.
Are you the ultimate FSU fan? We're your ultimate Seminole sports source. Subscribe to Warchant TV, where we bring to life the award-winning website, Warchant.com. Here you will find added opinion and analysis from the #1 team on the Florida State beat, a staff that brings over 50 years combined experience right to your phone or mobile device. Unmatched digital storytelling, original recruiting content, access to the top prospects in the nation, unflinching post-game wrap-ups, and the daily podcast Wake Up Warchant. All free of charge every day right here on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and use the promo code WARCHANT30 for a risk-free 30-day trial of premium access to Warchant.com, home to the most active, passionate FSU community online, featuring exclusive insider access you won't find anywhere else. You're the ultimate Florida State fan? Connect to Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Wrapping it up on the Warchant.com report, but let me remind you to make sure you're subscribed to Warchant TV by clicking on the subscribe button on the bottom right of the video. Click on the bell to be notified of when new videos and live shows are available. And speaking of which, by the way, there will be a live show available, Warchant TV on YouTube, Saturday, 10 a.m. Myself, Tom Lang, with the pregame show. Make sure you stick around afterwards for the postgame show between Florida State, NC State. Gene Williams and Tom Lang, again, will join you and take your calls. I'm sure it's gotten interesting late at night, Gene, lately. You guys always get these night games, and you're up till 1 o'clock in the morning taking calls.
Yeah, I love the drunken caller at 1 a.m. Those are always fun.
Well, they're in such good moods these days. So, yeah, it's got to be a lot of fun. Is Jordan Travis not the long-term solution at quarterback because he's fragile? Hey, poll question, everybody. Here we go. I do. I wonder about it. And also, what's left to play for? Should FSU play in a bowl game? Because they're going to be able to if you'd like to. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to get to here, a lot of meat on the bone. The NCAA ruled that every FBS team is eligible to play in a bowl game in 2020. So, would you go play? Guys, let's talk about it. Let's start with Jordan Travis. Not very dependable at this point, and he is unique in his suddenness, his ability to make guys miss. As a runner, he's special. He's a below-average thrower of the football. Can't really hurt you from the pocket. Teams will attempt, certainly, to take him away. Easier said than done. Is he the long-term answer? Heck, for that matter, do we feel like we're going to see a lot of growth in the next year from Chubba Purdy? I think a lot of people are worried the quarterback's not on the roster.
I think one thing we got to do with Jordan Travis, what we don't know is about that shoulder. It seems like that was something issue, even going back to the preseason. Is this something in the offseason they can fix surgically where it's not an issue going forward? I mean, then maybe it's not such a fragile issue. Maybe it's just he had an issue that's lingering. He keeps kind of re-injuring it. And I would also think getting him bigger and stronger in the offseason to be able to handle some of this punishment, because he's the kind of quarterback that's going to take a lot of hits. But I think the coaching staff, it's pretty simple, man. You got to get two guys ready to go. You can run a similar system with him and Chubba, and that way, if he goes down or if Chubba's a starter and he goes down, you got another guy who can run the same system. So I mean, I think that's the ultimate solution. You get them both ready to start next season in case he is fragile and he can't make it through a season.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario, honestly, is that Jordan Travis is a big part of the offense, but not the offense. What I think is unrealistic is to expect him to go out there and have the ball in his hands 70 times and not get hurt at that size. So, but he has to be a big part of the offense. I mean, he is a special football player. They don't have anybody else on this roster, including, I mean, we like Lawrence Toafili. He's a nice player. They've got a couple other freshmen that are talented, Ja'Kai Douglas and a couple other guys. They don't have anybody on this team that can do what Jordan Travis can do, and they probably won't next year either. So he's got to be a big part of it. But I think kind of like a Percy Harvin at Florida, where maybe he's touching the ball 20 times, but the defense doesn't know when those times are going to come. So they can't just tee off on him. I think what you saw in that Pitt game, when he got hurt in that game, that defensive lineman zeroed in. It was like playing a video game when like the target lights up red and you know you've got a kill shot. Like he knew exactly what he was doing when he jumped on Jordan Travis and buried him into the ground. And so that's what if he's got the ball all the time, they're just going to wait until they can wear him down or get that kill shot on him. And so you can't have him be the whole offense. Whether it's Chubba Purdy or Luke Altmaier or Tate Rodemaker, we'll have to see. There's a lot of time to get to that point. Going back and looking at Chubba Purdy in the second half, it's really unfair to judge him from that Pitt game because it was a jailbreak every time he touched. You know, it's like you guys suggested maybe rolling him out more often. He had to roll out every play anyway because he had three guys coming free on every pass. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I like Jordan Travis is not just like a spot player, but it is kind of like a number one weapon, but just not having the ball in his hands every time.
So Ira, if I can jump in here, you thinking would this be a scenario where you go old school like 77 Wally and Jordan? You know, maybe this is a two. If you get both guys ready, maybe you do have a two-headed monster quarterback.
Yeah, I'd line him up at receiver. I'd line him at running back. I'd line him up at quarterback. I would use him, you know, like you're seeing, you know, the Saints have their guy. I mean, you know, using him in a bunch of different ways. And Mike Norvell has shown the ability to do that at Memphis.
Yeah, Taysom Hill for the Saints is who you're alluding
Yeah.
to. Of course, he's big as hell, but yeah, that helps. But I think you're right. I think he's got to be a part of the office. There's no doubt about that. And they did that. Remember, go back to the Miami game. They had packages for him. So I think they were starting to look at that. It's just that James Blackman couldn't carry the load. But, I think you're definitely going to have to utilize that skill set because it is truly unique. But I agree. I think in terms of him being your primary quarterback, probably not a good idea. So let's say the season plays out as we now suspect that it will. Let's say Florida State falls on Saturday night. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But we know they're not going to beat Clemson. Hell, if they're smart, they won't play Clemson. COVID is on the horizon. It's right there. You can see it. It's going to happen the second the clock ticks 0 on Saturday night against NC State. Everybody's got it. We're done. Sorry, can't play. But if they do play, that's 150-7, whatever the final score is there, and this continues to be off the tracks. If Florida State finishes the year at 2-9 or whatever it is, would you take the bowl game because you get the practices? But again, you got to have the requisite personnel. You got to have the depth. You got to have the players. What do you guys think about a bowl game?
I think you would take it if it was offered, but I just don't know if it's going to get offered. Early on, before the season, I thought if Florida State finished under 500, 5-6, or maybe in 4-7, I thought they might get an invitation because of the fact that they are Florida State. But I don't know how the ACC is going to let all of these other teams with better records get passed over that could possibly get passed over for Florida State to get in. Now, if that's not the case, if there's more bowls tie-ins than there are teams that are eligible in the ACC or worthy in the ACC, then maybe. But I just don't know if a 2-9 or 3-8 Florida State team gets in. If they can, though, yes, 100% take it. They need these practices. They didn't get a spring. Who knows what the future is going to hold with COVID. If they get the green light to get 15 practices in, I think they 100% have to use them.
Take the bowl, Gene. Definitely say yes.
No. Hypothetically, again, I agree with that. I think the odds are against it happening, but if it did, I got to say no. It feels like a really bad relationship that you just got to cut the cord on at this point. And again, we talked about more players are going to be leaving. And after the regular season starts out, I think a lot of these players that are going to be leaving are going to be putting themselves in the transfer portal. They're going to be getting ready, whether their careers or another school. I don't know if you're going to be able to field enough players, but I think you got to let the fans and the program out of their misery a little bit to drag it on. I get it. 15 practices are good, but I just don't know if you're going to get that much out of it when you're going to have some massive changes in the offseason and just the fans don't want to see it. Look, at the end of the day, I would say this. That's my opinion. I don't think I'd want to see them play it. I would pull the players. If the players still want to play in the bowl game, you go ahead and play it, I guess. But I honestly don't know if they would want to. They may just say, what? We've seen enough. We're out.
But here's the problem. Usually December is a good time for recruiting, but you can't even do that right now. So what are you going to be doing? Just hanging out?
Well, virtually, I guess you can, but that's about it.
I hear what you're saying, and I know the fans would
weight room, Ira. Everybody in the weight room.
Yeah. Well, they do need to do that.
Well, they also need to prioritize some time to cheat. And so you really got to start getting yourself in a position to start paying off some players and getting some people in here to rectify this devastating set of circumstances. So they need to prep and really get down what they're doing to be underhanded and flip this thing a little bit quicker.
Get to those schools and the players, the transfer portal. You got to start greasing up that portal a little bit.
That's correct. You got to incentivize the transfer portal, Ira. You got to identify some folks, then talk about based on positions of need. For example, if it were a tackle or a linebacker or a twitchy defensive end that can actually rush the passer, you might incentivize those individuals in the portal and prioritize what kind of conversations you have with them.
Instead of going out and recruiting some key players, maybe go out and recruit some rogue boosters. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right.
Go to Ole Miss. We
don't call them rogue boosters. We call them fans of the program, investors in future success for these young men. These are people that are committed to doing what's necessary to see Florida State reach its rightful place atop the mountain. That's all I'm saying. Got to identify these individuals who want to be part of the solution. We're not going to do picks this week in terms of the games because so many of them have been canceled. And I guess, we should make one pick here. How ugly does it get Saturday night, Florida State, NC State? This line initially, if you jumped on it, if you were smart, you jumped on NC State -7. It's moved up to 10 now. It may go up further if they begin to sense that certainly Jordan Travis isn't going to play. You think the boys are game on Saturday night? I'll start with you, Gene.
10, I'm still taking NC State, even at 10 points. I hate to say it, man. It's just I don't see any way around. There's just nothing that I've seen the last few weeks that makes me think they're going to be able to be competitive in this game. I mean, even if it's close at halftime, we've seen they've melted down in the second half. There's just nothing there. After they get done with their scripted plays, the offense, I mean, they haven't scored in the second half in 3 games. The offense hasn't, I don't believe. So when you don't score in the second half, even if it's close, you're probably going to lose and lose badly.
Ira?
Yeah, and generally, I'm not a big fan of laying double-digit points with a bad defense. But in this case, yeah, I definitely would. I would take NC State. I think if you're a Florida State fan, what you want to see in this game, especially early on. Now, I know like people sometimes will point out players quitting on a pick, like the pick game. Some guys like didn't give great effort after the pick 6 when they're down 41-7 or whatever. Man, I'll give some guys a little bit of a pass on those. You want to see the effort in the first half, especially. It would be great if it was there for every minute of every game. But while the game is still a game, early on especially, watch that. Do these guys come out even with if Jordan Travis doesn't play, you've already lost some other guys. If the effort is really good, that's a good sign. I just don't know if Florida State's good enough or has enough depth to win this game. So I would take NC State. But I don't think it's a lost cause for Florida State fans in terms of don't even watch it. Watch to see, how the young guys do, how Chuba Purdy does if he gets a lot of playing time, and also how these guys compete, because I think that's what you're looking for right now.
Every time we sit down and we do this show and we talk about the results of the previous game and what might happen in the next game, it hits me harder and harder that Florida State finds themselves in this position. It is unimaginable, but this is where we sit. And the truth hurts. And so oftentimes it may sound like we're overly negative, but we're just being honest at this point. This is not a good situation. The quicker we can get this season over with, the better. And by the way, thank goodness basketball starts really soon. I know we're going to have great coverage right here on warchant.com for the basketball team, as they have warranted. I mean, they are a perennial top 4 team in the ACC. They're the reigning ACC champions. They're preseason ranked yet again. They have one of the most exciting freshmen in the country. So just an early plug for a lot of Florida State basketball coverage right here on warchant.com. Speaking of warchant.com, don't forget pregame show, 10 a.m., myself and Tom Lang, Warchant TV on YouTube. Postgame show, Gene Williams and Tom Lang, Warchant TV on YouTube. For Gene, for Ira, for Aslan, and to all of you, thanks so much for watching. I'm Jeff Cameron. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.